Hello, everyone. This is Jeffrey Care. The 79th annual Tony Awards are almost here. They'll be taking place tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on CBS. To prepare you all for Broadway's biggest night, let's make some predictions. By the way, you'll be hearing me reference the New York Times' recently published Tony voter poll, which surveyed about 175 out of 850 voters, quite a bit. For Best Musical, according to the Times, the stage adaptation of the cult Apple TV Plus series Schmigadoon is ahead to win this coveted prize. Supporters said that they appreciate its heart and humor as it's a show that pays homage to the golden age of musicals. That appears to be resonating with industry insiders. Although, in case there's a last minute upset, The Lost Boys, a spectacle rich pop rock musical adaptation of the 1987 cult film, could benefit from that. Its backers say that they have been wowed by the stagecraft. If that were to happen, it'd be remarkable given this previous curse regarding vampire musicals such as Dance of the Vampires, Dracula, and Lestat each came to Broadway and were all huge flops. For Best Play, throughout the Tonys' near 80-year history, only three female playwrighs have won this coveted prize, and this year will likely be adding a fourth to the list with Bess Wool's Liberation. According to the Times, voters by a significant margin are throwing their support behind that play. Since ending its limited run back in February, it has really gained momentum with winning the Pulitzer Prize for Drama last month and scheduling productions at numerous American regional theaters and in London. Meanwhile, Mark Rosenblatt's Giant, a British drama about the anti-Semitism of beloved children's book author Roald Dahl, came in with amazing word of mouth from London's West End, yet it appeared to have suffered from not meeting everyone's high expectations. So, yes, expect Schmigadoon to take Best Musical and Liberation to take Best Play. Now, for Best Musical Revival, according to the Times, the leading contenders, Cats the Jungle Ball and Ragtime, have divided voters relatively evenly. The former may have a slight advantage from being a more experimental production, while the latter is more faithful to prior stagings. I will say that what Ragtime has in its favor is that emotionally, the musical now feels much more relevant to what's going on in the world than it ever has been before, feeling as if it could have been written yesterday. Plus, it's been a hot ticket for Lincoln Center Theater since the run began back in September, and that's remarkable because the show previously never had a successful run on Broadway. Even though the original production ran 2 years from 1998 through 2000, it still ended up losing a lot of money. Meanwhile, the first revival in 2009 was well received, but sadly never caught on with the public as it closed after just a couple of months. Not to mention that the musical itself still has yet to win a Best Production Tony. The original led in nominations, won for, was very competitive in Best Musical, but ultimately came up short to a little known show called The Lion King. And while the first revival was remembered with 6 nominations, the big musical revival winner that year was La Cage aux Folles with Kelsey Grammer and Douglas Hodge. And if Ragtime doesn't win this time, don't worry, because even West Side Story, one of the greatest musicals of all time, has never won a Best Production Tony. Its original production lost to The Music Man, while subsequent revivals didn't come out on top. So that obviously wouldn't be such bad company for Ragtime to be in. So in the end, I'm settling on Cats. The current revival reimagines Andrew Lloyd Webber's long-running hit from literal cats in a junkyard to human beings in the ballroom dance scene. That appears to fit the mold of a lot of the more recent winners in this category, such as the Diane Paulus helmed revival of Pippin, the John Doyle helmed revival of The Color Purple, the Michael Arden helmed revival of Once on This Island, the Daniel Fish helmed revival of Oklahoma, the Marian Elliott helmed revival of Company, the Maria Friedman helmed revival of Merrily We Roll Along, and the Jamie Lloyd helmed revival of Sunset Boulevard. Productions that managed to respect the author's intentions while still making audiences look at the shows in brand new ways. It especially helps for This show in particular, as many of you for years made fun of it for having no plot at all. I could very well be wrong, and Ragtime could still win, but I have every good reason to not bet against Cats. Now, for Best Play Revival, according to the Times, two much buzzed about contenders, Death of a Salesman and Oedipus, have broken from the pack in such a strong season for this category. The former appears to be ahead, but its lead is not insurmountable. Meanwhile, the latter could theoretically pull ahead. It is worth noting that the lead producer behind Death of a Salesman is Scott Rudin, who a few years ago stepped away from Broadway after it was exposed of how abusive he was in the workplace. I mean, this season marked his first time back since then. Now, on paper, you would think that'd be a strike against the production, although we've seen time and again that voters, by and large, just don't care about controversies. They're just, at the end of the day, voting for what they liked most. Plus, what I can see helping Death of a Salesman is the fact that it's not only one of the most frequently produced American plays of all time, but it also just had an all-Black revival with Wendell Pierce just 3 years ago. So when this one was announced, a number of people argued that was way too soon for another revival. Yet, when they saw it, they finally understood why it had to come back again. It's a completely different take on this American classic, so much to the point that those who know the play so well managed to find several aspects they never noticed before. Thus, I'm predicting Death of a Salesman to win in the end. Now, for Best Lead Actor in a Musical, according to the Times, this race appears to be all sewn up for Joshua Henry. His performance as Coalhouse Walker Jr. has wowed audiences with his booming baritone and has overwhelming support from a supermajority of voters. Now, in 1998, Brian Stokes Mitchell was nominated for originating the role of Coalhouse in Ragtime, but ended up losing to Alan Cumming in the Sam Mendes, Rob Marshall helmed revival of Cabaret. Meanwhile, Quentin Earl Darrington, who played Coalhouse in the first revival, wasn't even nominated. Now, it's not only looking like third time will be the charm for that character, but also the fourth time for Joshua Henry. I mean, within the past 15 years, he's received prior nominations for his work in The Scottsboro Boys, Violet, and Carousel, but didn't win either time, so he better have a speech ready for tomorrow night. Now, for Best Lead Actress in a Musical, according to the Times, this race also appears to be all sewn up for Casey Levy. She has impressed voters with her depiction of mothers' gradual assertion of independence and ideas. Her support, although not quite as stratospheric as Henry's, also appears to be insurmountably strong. In a way, this sort of reminds me of Daniel Radcliffe's trajectory for Merrily We Roll Along 2 years ago. This mainstay of the New York theater scene, who not only finally gets their very first Tony nomination after years in the business, but also have that nom result in. In fact, around the time nominations were announced, Levy talked about how it recently marked 20 years since she made her Broadway debut as Penny in Hairspray. Now, all this goodwill she's built within the past 2 decades is looking like it will culminate with her finally getting her flowers. Mother in Ragtime has previously earned its actresses nominations for both of the show's prior Broadway outings. Mayor and Maisie in 1998, she lost to Natasha Richardson in Cabaret, and Christiane Knoll in 2010, where she lost to Catherine Zeta-Jones in A Little Night Music. And like Coalhouse, it looks like third time will be the charm for this character. Now, for Best Lead Actor in a Play, according to the Times, John Lithgow looks to be ahead of it for his portrayal of Raoul Dole in Giant over his main rival, Nathan Lane in Death of a Salesman, but an upset in this category is possible. I will say that what the latter has going for him is that he's playing Willy Loman, one of the most defining roles in the American theater. So far, all the actors who've earned Tony bids for taking it on, Brian Dennehy in 1999 is the only one to have prevailed. With this Death of a Salesman being the Best Play Revival frontrunner, it's possible that Lane could go along for the ride. Plus, after having won 3 times before for A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Farm in 1996, The Producers in 2001, and Angels in America in 2018, he would become the third male actor in history to win 4 Tonys following Boyd Gaines and Frank Langella. However, because the Times suggested that Lithgow is ahead, I'm settling on him. When people see Death of a Salesman, they find many aspects to rave about, but when they see Giant, their main takeaway is Lithgow's performance. Plus, it helps that he's playing a real person, and we all know how much that can be real catnip for awards voters. For Best Lead Actress in a Play, according to the Times, Leslie Manville appears to have a healthy lead for Oedipus, while Susanna Flood appears to be the runner-up for Liberation. The latter could happen if this ends up being a really good night for that play, especially if voters would prefer to award a veteran of the New York theater scene, although the former, in her Broadway debut, gave such a buzzed about performance back in the fall, especially with this standout monologue. She already won an Olivier Award for the West End run last year, so don't be surprised if she also ends up taking home a Tony tomorrow night. Now, for Best Featured Actor in a Musical, with the exception of Bryce Pinkham in Chess, any of the other 4 nominees could actually take this. I mean, Ali Louise Borsky is one of Broadway's buzziest rising stars, giving a standout performance in The Lost Boys. Ben Levi Ross, as Mother's younger brother in Ragtime, has the trickiest character arc to pull off in the musical itself. Leighton Williams has been knocking audiences out with his show-stopping rendition of River Deep, Mountain High, and Titanic. He did win an Olivier for his performance in the West End production last year, yet I'm going with Andre DeShields. He may have already won an overdue first Tony for Hadestown back in 2019, but his performance as Old Deuteronomy in Cats the Jellicle Ball has stood out for establishing the overall vibe for that revival, feeling as if the role was created for him. I mean, any of the other 3 wouldn't surprise me that much, but I'm still betting on DeShields. For Best Featured Actress in a Musical, the way I see it, there's 3 possibilities. These for who could come out on top. If Schmigadoon were to take an acting prize, maybe Anna Gasteyer in this particular category. I mean, she has a standout number in Act 2, inspired by You Got Trouble, a real tongue twister of a song from The Music Man. There's Nichelle Lewis as Sarah in Ragtime, role that previously won Audra McDonald her 3rd Tony for the original production. Voters may very well see Lewis and Henry as a packaged deal. I mean, how can you award one without awarding the other? Yet Shoshana Bean is now on her 3rd nomination in 5 years. After having previously contended for Mr. Saturday Night in 2022 and Hell's Kitchen in 2024, she's up for The Lost Boys. She's been in the business for years, is regarded as one of the greatest Broadway singers working today, and has such a standout number in her show with Wild. And interestingly enough, Casey Levy was originally set to play her character in The Lost Boys. She did a number of workshops and was part of the initial casting announcements for the Broadway run, yet she ended up dropping out to not only stay with Ragtime, but also to avoid spending so much time away from her young kids to go through tech of 2 big productions in the same season. It would be something if Levy and Bean both won in their respective categories. Now, for Best Featured Actor in a Play, this category appears to be a bit of a tough one to call. I mean, Christopher Abbott could win for delivering what many feel is the definitive take on Biff Loman in Death of a Salesman. Ruben Santiago Hudson is a beloved August Wilson interpreter, currently taking on a classic role in one of his plays, Joe Turner's Come and Gone. Yet, many who have seen Becky Shaw were blown away by Alden Ehrenreich's scene-stealing performance. He reportedly has passionate support among Tony voters and has rocketed ahead of the competition. It'd be remarkable if he wins, as nearly a decade ago, he starred as a young Han Solo in a Star Wars anthology film that flopped at the box office. After that, many wondered what was going to become of his career, yet within the past few years, he's rebounded with appearances in Oscar-winning hits such as Oppenheimer and Weapons. Now he's a frontrunner to win a Tony for his Broadway debut, which is exactly what I'm predicting. For Best Featured Actress in a Play, this is probably the easiest of the four featured acting categories. Laurie Metcalf may have already won in separate categories 2 years in a row as lead for A Doll's House Part 2 in 2017 and featured for Three Tall Women in 2018, but that's not going to stop her from winning a third for Death of a Salesman. I mean, one of the many aspects about the revival people have sung their praises for, including Meryl Streep, is Metcalf's performance as Linda Lohman. Not to mention that her overall visibility this past season from her critically acclaimed performance as Little Bear Ridge Road back in the fall, which was remembered in Best Play, should also help with voters who managed to have seen both. So, yeah, don't bet against Metcalf. Now, for Best Direction of a Musical, according to many predictors, it looks like this race is also between Cats the Jellicle Ball and Ragtime. The latter is directed by Lear de Bessonet as her first production as the new artistic director of Lincoln Center Theater. Her staging may not have a ton of bells and whistles, but she does bring such exceptional performances out of her cast. Plus, for voters who may have seen the original production and were among those who found it overblown, I can see them appreciating her contributions and presenting the show in a way that doesn't feel overproduced. Yet I'm going with Cats on this one. The grand reimagining of that one comes exactly from the directing team of Julian Livingston and Bill Rauch. Their overall vision has to be one of the biggest directorial accomplishments of the season. It'd be a surprise to not see them win. Now, for Best Direction of a Play, Joe Mantello previously won 2 Tonys in back-to-back years. In 2003 for the play Take Me Out, then in 2004 for the musical Assassins. Now, 2 decades later, he's managed to impress everyone with his rethinking of Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. A key aspect many have found most successful with the revival is his direction. I do think he'll win, although there is a possibility that Whitney White could upset as part of a potential surge for liberation. If she prevails, she'd become the very first African American woman in history to win a Tony for directing. Now, for Best Book of a Musical, as this category is often tied to Best Musical, I'm expecting Cinco Paul to take this for Schmigadoon. And believe it or not, he originally conceived this idea as a stage musical about 25 years ago, before eventually revisiting it as a television series. Here, he managed to take 6 half-hour episodes of the first season and condense them all into a 2.5-hour Broadway show. Of the 2 writing categories he's up for, I think this is where he'll most likely prevail. Although if there's an upset, I'd keep an eye out on Two Strangers Carried Cake Across New York, as it's the only nominee in this category that's completely original from top to bottom. Now, for Best Original Score, according to Gold Derby, Two Strangers is expected to take this as its only win on Tony night. If that happens, it would mark the first time a show won Best Score and nothing else since Gigi way back in 1974. Will it happen? It's possible. I mean, Two Strangers has literally been the little show that could all season long. It's this completely original 2-person musical from England that opened way back in the fall with no stars, and many thought it'd be gone by New Year's Day. Yet, here we are in June, and it's still running. If voters would like to throw a bone to the only completely original musical to have opened on Broadway this season, this could be the place to do so, especially if they would like to award the creators of the show. As for other possibilities, I mean, The Lost Boys could benefit from being the musical with the most score, courtesy of The Rescues. And yet, like The Outsiders 2 years ago, many have felt that the show is more of an achievement with its stagecraft, but not so much its writing. I mean, Schmigadoon could prevail here as a precursor to its likely Best Musical prize. It arguably has the most tuneful score in contention here. Then again, there may be a number of voters who scoff at the fact that the score itself isn't completely original. I mean, Cinco Paul did write enough new material to qualify for an nomination here, but everything else is lifted from the first season of the TV show. Musicals where the score isn't 100% original rarely win this category. The only exceptions I can think of are the aforementioned Gigi for Lerner and Lowe. At least a good deal of the songs were lifted from the 1958 movie musical. The original Cats in 1983, it was basically Andrew Lloyd Webber setting music to a bunch of T.S. Eliot's poems. The Who's Tommy, in a tie with Kander and Ebb for Kiss of the Spider Woman in 1993. I mean, most of the music in the former was lifted from Pete Townshend's classic album. Most recently, Newsies in 2012, several of the songs by Alan Menken and Jack Feldman were lifted from the 1992 Disney film. Therefore, I'm gonna play it safe by predicting Two Strangers, although I wouldn't be too surprised if either of the other two takes it. Now, for best choreography, it's possible Christopher Catelli could win this as a potential coattail prize for Schmigadoon, especially since he's also nominated for directing, and voters would want to, acknowledge his overall contributions in putting the show together. And this would be, appear to be an appropriate place to do so. But that being said, I'm predicting Omari Isles and Arturo Lyons to win for Cats the Jellicle Ball. For many, one of the most successful aspects of the revival is the brand new ballroom style choreography. Some of the most talked about dancing on Broadway this season, so that's where I'm heading. That just about does it for my predictions for this year's Tony winners. Be sure to catch the Tonys tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on CBS. Although prior to that is the Tony Awards Act 1, an 85-minute pre-show hosted by Laura Benanti and Titus Burgess that begins at 6:35 p.m. Eastern, 3:35 Pacific. If you'd like to tune in for that, just click on the live music channel found within the entertainment category on Pluto TV. No payment, registration, or sign in required, so take care.